Namaste and in catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, which I haven't always done, subscribe, like, share. It's what helps us grow. It helps you grow. So thank you very much. And speaking of things to do, you can also go to planetarycitizens.net and download a free copy of Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart of Humanity. It's something that will definitely tickle your heartstrings. So thanks for that too. Now, this week's guest is Peter Merrick. He is an author, a CEO. He has Merrick Wealth. He's a CEO of wealth management company. His book, It's All About the Gold, has just hit the market recently. It's bound to be a bestseller. We're going to talk more about that. He is a wildly intelligent gentleman, and you're going to love the conversation we're going to have, and we'll be right back, so don't go away.
Explore the thoughtless sphere. Embark on a life-changing journey of self-discovery. Embrace harmony with self, with others, with Earth. One world in a new world. Zen Benefiel skillfully ignites conversations, guiding guests to reveal personal journeys and perspectives. Listeners are inspired to seek knowledge and find wisdom in their own lives. Join this transformative journey as we navigate the depth of human experience.
Peter, it is so great to have you here. When a good friend, Lonnie Ray, recommended you. She is such a sweetheart and doing great things for people sharing their stories. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Zen. Thank you. It's a real
Now,
honor.
and mine as well. It's just we honor everyone. It's the whole namaste and in-law catch. A lot of times I don't say what those words mean. Namaste comes from the Hindu. It means I worship that which is within you, from the Sanskrit. In la catch is a Mayan phrase. It means I am another you. So if we can begin to see each other in that perspective, wow, what a shift it would make, eh?
It would. And one of my favorite books that was suggested to me when I openly started my journey back in my 20s was I and Thou.
Yes.
I don't know if you're, and
Nick
it
Van
really
Han.
changed. Yes, it really, I'm having a senior moment of who the author is, but I'll come
Nick
back to me.
Van Han.
I don't think it was, it's Martin Buber.
Oh, yes. Correct.
Martin
Right.
Buber.
He,
Sorry for correcting you. It was a
oh, don't
book
be
that I
sorry. I love
needed.
to be corrected. We're after the
It
truth, right?
was what happened in my 20s. I always felt a little different, and my life was going on a different track. And I went into the world's largest bookstore in Toronto, where I lived, and literally it was the world's largest bookstore until it closed, and it had a book of everything. And I bought 7 books, and I just had entered the financial field, and reality hit. I was a cocky young graduate thinking I was going to take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly discovered that I had a lot to learn. So I went to the world's largest bookstore in Toronto, and I bought a bunch of books on sales, on neurolinguistic programming, all these, type of the Myers-Briggs, I bought 7 books. And I never really was a reader. I read because I had to read, but these
Mm-hmm.
books I wanted to read, and I devoured them. And what came out of that is I then started taking courses.
Sure.
And I would travel around North America when I had enough money to go to these conferences. And I went to the first International Enneagram Conference. I went to NLP trainings around North America. And I was a little kid who was learning some powerful tools, meaning when I was looking at neurolinguistic programming, at first I approached it as I was going to learn this powerful way of listen to me, and it's in that, not realizing that it's like
Like
life
Silva
is a
mind
mirror.
training, right?
Yeah, and it all comes back to you. However, I'm one of the people I was trained by this really incredible doctor in Toronto who trained under Wyatt Woodsmall. And someone who was part of the group, who was a psychologist, would bring me around to AA meetings in the Toronto area, and I would do guided meditation. And she thought that here's a little kid, not a little kid, but here's someone who's learned a karate chop. It doesn't have the deeper understanding, because I was really into form. I was reading new physics and things like that, but it didn't mean anything to me. And she said to me, Peter, you have to read Martin Buber's I and Thou. And I was reading it,
Yes.
and that was such a powerful paradigm shift for me. And the reason it was a paradigm shift for me, because I and thou instead of I and it. And over the years, I've understood it even greater. So if I look at you as a it, I can abuse you, I can rob you, I can do all sorts of things. If I think you are a thou, part of the infinite, I have to I will want to, I'm compelled to treat you as an extension of me. But let me share
Yeah.
with you how I've interpreted it, because I've spent a lot of time, because I've spent, oh my, I don't know, 30 years thinking about it since I first read it, or over 30 years. I in it. I don't see you. I don't see you. I don't see me. Then there's I and you. I see you, but I and thou should be, do I see myself?
Right.
Because if I don't see myself, then I can't see you. And that's
Sure.
what I and thou is. So in essence, a lot of people say, I think like, do unto others as you would have done to them. Well, they're thinking about how they should treat other people, but they've never turned they've never turned the mirror on themselves. How do I treat
Sure.
myself?
Well,
And if I treat myself well, I'm going to treat you well.
absolutely. And that's really what self-love is all about, right? And that has such a misunderstood connotation in the world because it seems selfish, and yet it's just the opposite. You know, law of one's another thing you probably ran into, LL Research, and they say that, you know, there's the service to self and service to others, and we're either promoted by love or fear. And well, you know, that's still binary. We're in one universe. And from our perspective, right, regardless of all the parallel universe philosophies, our experience is of one. And in that, we have the capacity to understand our integration in that, our reflection, our movement, our ability to join with others in a co-creation process, because we have that capacity. That's how we're designed to be. And we've been inundated and programmed by a patriarchal society that initially, you know, took women as a rib, which subjugated them, and said, oh, well, man's superior. No, that's such bullshit. Sorry. We're equal. We have, that's an aspect of the divine feminine, the divine masculine. And so those have synonymous, not synonymous, synchronistic activity, synergistic activity in this co-creation process. Each one of us have those aspects within us. And the feminine side is that kinesthetic side of men, you know, the feeling, the emotion, the willingness to be vulnerable that most men are unwilling to broach. And the women then they're learning. I had it's interesting. Sorry to go off on a tangent here. Willie Whitefeather, an old mixed blood Cherokee storyteller, he was saying that one of their prophecies is that women will cut their hair, put on warm paint, and go to battle. Well, and this was in the um, early 90s when I did this, and sure enough, you know, you look at the corporate world, women were cutting their hair, you know, putting the suits on, the makeup, and going to battle with the guys, right? So how do we get through all of this was one of my questions early on too, kind of like you. How do we merge these things? When you were in that process, did you notice some breadcrumbs, if you will, that allowed that synergistic awareness to become present? It doesn't necessarily mean you could do anything about it yet, but in your early training and the naivety you still had as a student, did you find those things?
I think one of the things that was something that's been both a gift, and it's also been not a gift, is I'm very curious.
The blessing
So
and the
my
curse, right?
curiosity, it is because I could put myself in harm's way from my curiosity. Like I will, like whatever fear I have, and I had an experience when I was in university. I was sitting in the library at my university, and I was going to run for the executive vice president position of the student council, and
Hmm.
I had over 250 signatures, and I went to the library, and it was the second largest university in Canada. It was like 45,000 undergrads,
Hmm.
and I was sitting there for about 4 hours, and I could have just submitted it in. And then a voice came to me, and it was my voice. It says, "Why are you so scared?" Like that, because I was going to put myself out there. And I
Sure.
realized something, and this has carried me my entire life. And I think that was like a pivotal moment. That's why I'm sharing it with you now, because I wanted it. And the reason I wasn't going to do it, because if I didn't put my foot forward, I would never know. So I could never say, well, I lost and I didn't deserve it. And it
Sure.
was that pull. And throughout my entire life, and I was like 20 years old, I now ask myself, when I feel a sense of fear, the question, and I feel it, because I realize my body has so much, it tells me so much that my cognitive brain can't put into words. Why are you frightened? You're frightened because it really is dangerous, or you're frightened because if you do it and it doesn't work out, you're going to be devastated because you put yourself out. And I realize now, if when I answer it, it's because you really want it, and that's why you're scared. That propels me, and my
As
curiosity
it ought
does.
to, right? That fear is a door to success.
It is, but there are legitimate ones, because
Oh,
if I'm on the
absolutely.
sixth
You don't
street,
walk out in front of a bus, right?
right?
But those are things are so silly and inconsequential when it comes to that. That's a good argument. But at the same time, there's this nature that we have 70,000 thoughts a day, right? Most of them self-deprecating. And so that continues to hold us back because we're playing the imposter syndrome, right? We don't think we're enough, know enough, have enough,
Yeah,
are, all those kinds of things, enough. And the reality is we are enough, right? And we get to be more enough by stepping into that, by leaning into the fear and opening the door. And on the other side of that, we find out, really it's just about loving and being loved. And first, loving self. Otherwise, you can't love others fully. And what's the
I
depths of that
agree.
self-love, right? What did you find when you started exploring this understanding that you had of the depths of loving yourself to the point of becoming fearless in those regards?
I would never say it's fearless. I just understand by asking that question. And one of the things that I impress upon everybody is, I shared with you, I'm highly kinesthetic. There's moments that basically are imprinted on me
Hmm.
where I took notice. And
Right.
that moment, I felt it. I was in it. It's like, here's something I went all the way to, get 250 signatures, and I didn't hand it in until the last 10 minutes. And that handing it in changed my life. Well, it didn't change my life because I believe that this is my direction. And in essence,
Well, it
I
changed your
think,
attitude
I
about
think,
you.
well, I want to share with you my thoughts on free will. We have free will. My definition is this: both of us are meant to do something. And your free will is not to do it and suffer the consequences.
Hmm.
And that's the conclusion I came in my own life. And I tell younger people that all the time. I say, you have a unique value proposition. You have something that's
Absolutely.
unique. And there's going to be three types of people you're going to meet. You're going to meet people who immediately see your unique value proposition. You're going to meet people who don't have the eyes yet to see it, and they will. And there'll be those, it doesn't matter what you do, they'll never see it. And as I got older, I just look at how would I say, for those people who are predisposed, and I'll give you an example and how I make that quick, like how that happens and manifests quicker. As I shared with you, I'm originally from Canada, so we don't have like oceans and things of that nature. So there really are no salmon. If I wanted to catch salmon, I'm not going to go to a river in, let's say, feeding into the Ontario Lake. I'm going to go to the mouth of the Simon Fraser River. I have a much better chance. I have to go there. And I'll share with you a movie that symbolizes a lot for me, and my interpretation might be different than other people, and it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I'll share with you what it means to me.
You know, that began
because I think,
where I grew up.
wow.
I actually had ship experiences from the time I was 8 to 10 years old. An orange cigar-shaped cloud. Didn't know anything about it. Just couldn't wait to go back when I'd wake up in the morning. Never talk to anybody. Then, and I would watch myself get out of bed, climb out my window, walk across the neighbor's backyard out into a field, and rise up into this, the observer self watching the participant. And then in 1981, I was getting ready to move to Phoenix, and the book falls. I'm in a metaphysical bookstore in Muncie, and a book falls off the shelf in front of me. And I walk over, and there's nobody else around, right? You probably had this happen. I walk over, and it's cover up open on the floor, and it's Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I picked it up and turned it over. And the first paragraph that my eyes are drawn to says the most common UFO contactee experience in the Midwest in the late 50s and early 60s was the, ta-da, orange cigar-shaped cloud. And I never thought about that till that moment. I was 23 at the time, right? So there was 15 years that had gone past. But those kinds of things. And then when Close Encounters came out and it starts in Muncie, like, whoa.
I want to share with you what it symbolized, because I
sure.
realize metaphor.
It connected.
No, metaphor.
It's one of the synchronicities that we find as we talk.
Yes. So for me, I didn't have the words, and we're going to be talking about an experience I had about 2 years ago where I finally have been able to integrate the words to explain what I experienced. However, with that movie, what it symbolizes, because it's not the greatest acted movie, it's not, but here are millions of people who are invited. They're invited, and millions of people don't go. Now here is Ray, who's the hero of the story, Richard Dreyfuss. He goes. He's invited and he goes. And all of us have an invitation. And where I shared about free will, it's you have a destiny, I have a destiny. It's a different destiny. It's sort of like you're a cell, I'm a cell, right? Like we have different purposes.
And they all work together.
They all work together.
When we allow that.
Buckminster Fuller is one of my heroes in the critical path. But that to me represents, like, we have a calling. And my life has not been conventional. It has been work-wise. It's been in the financial field in all sorts of areas as a writer, as a university professor, as a textbook writer, as a consultant. However, the way I've gone about it, I'm an oddball.
An oddball. That
I am. Well, not that bald, but I do shave. But I look at that. I look at that as such a powerful metaphor that we all have a glimpse. I think it was Winston Churchill, who I'm not the greatest fan of. However, a clock could be right twice a day, right? And he said most people, they have a moment of inspiration, they fall down, but they quickly dust themselves off and they rush back to their life. And I realized recently and earlier, but I'm willing to take ownership of it, is I believe we're all born NPCs, non-participating characters. However, we have the potential to grow. And the question the most powerful question, and I addressed it in my last book to ask, because I had to ask it myself, especially
Sure.
during the beginning of COVID, because my spidey senses said there's much more to this.
Something's
And
going
I know
on, right?
something's going on, and I know it, like, but it was all academic to me, all my reading, all my studying, whatever. It's like I
Sure.
felt, the alarm bells going. And the question I asked, and I think it's a very powerful question, and I came up with 5 answers, is why do I believe what I believe? Why do I believe it? And, because I'm an NPC, I just believe it. I believe the world's round. I believe the world is, I believe the financial system works this way. I believe pharmakia is for my best interest. I just believe everything. I believe it because it hadn't yet impacted me, because I really had a charmed life. I've done well professionally. So in essence, and I worked with entrepreneurs, so I never really dealt with the government. And I had a really good friend of mine who worked for the national broadcaster in Canada, who was telling me that I didn't know in 2015, 16. He said, Peter, you don't understand. I said, what do you mean? He said, it has just changed. Like, it's just the PC culture, everything has just changed. But you live in a special world. And what happened is during COVID, that world out there that was changing society now impacted me. And I really had to sit down and ask that question. I want to give you my 5 answers. Why do I believe what I believe? And I think that is one of the most powerful questions to start your awakening, because it did things for me.
Well, you
So the
question
first,
yourself. You question the truth that you perceive.
right. Well, I want to share with you the answers I gave
Sure.
to myself. I believe because there was no reason to doubt the people who told me. There was no reason to. And then number 2, when I
Experts
got
in
a
the
little
field.
older, and I could have started really asking those questions. Well, no, even my mom, dad, church leaders, whatever. It's like you politician. There was no reason for me to question. It was just, they seemed to all. It was like a bunch of bees who just start, flapping their wings, and I start flapping my wings. It's like, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get a profession. I'm going to be a gerbil. I'm sorry. A few years ago, if I did that, you'd be running to the hills. So number 2, when I get older, the question, my reason was I'm just busy. I'm trying to make a life for myself. I'm trying to live out there. Like Carl Jung says, the first half of life is building your ego. And that's it. So who's going to look at those things? I'm trying to get material things. I'm trying to be a peacock, attract the most attractive woman who's going to have children with me. I'm going to get a house. I'm going to acquire status and everything. The other one is the number 3 was, well, I didn't want to ask the question. I didn't, like, you know what I mean? It's easier not to ask it. The 4th one is, maybe I'm too simple-minded to even know to formulate that question. Like, why do I believe what I believe? But the most important one, and the toughest answer, was I didn't want to be rejected by the community that I was part of. And it was a community that emerged unconsciously. And it was not a conscious community. I had people I liked to, I could talk. I wasn't conscious of it. And I want to share with you, I remember I read a book in 1999. It was called Co-Creation by Barbara Max Hubbard. I don't know if, and this book came to me.
I know Barbara. Did.
Okay.
Matter of fact, she helped co-author the Co-Creation Wheel.
Well, I read her book. I was in Boca in Florida, and I'm looking at her book in the bookstore. I put it down, and then that night, I had a very strange day that day. I knew my father was going to die that day, and in 10 minutes before I got the call, because he was in Toronto, a light went out in me, like something went out. And when the call came, I said, that's my mother, say that my father died 10 minutes before. Like, it was, I have to apologize. I'm going to sneeze.
It's all right.
Apologize. So
Boots are off.
if it was 3 years ago, people would be running to the hills, right? My sneezing.
Sure.
And I went back to the
That's all right.
bookstore.
We're safe. We're at a safe distance.
We are. So I went back to the bookstore. I bought her book. I felt drawn to her book, and I read it. And there was one thing that changed my life more than much of the other things that she wrote in the book. And what changed my life is she tells the story how she was stuck in Connecticut with 5 kids, and she felt isolated, and she walked into a bookstore and she found Maslow's book, and she wrote a letter saying, I'll take you to lunch if you come. And he contacted her. And what she actually said is, those people who write books, and I can tell this when I read a book, where the person is setting up a flare to find other people who are seeing the same things. And now with the internet, like you and I are meeting now, it's easier now to let them know we're here. And then share and empty our pockets and share with you saying what I saw, and you share what you saw. And that gave me the, if you impacted me as a writer, I would contact you. And when I was younger and I had lots of piss and vinegar, I would go and ask you, Zen, I read your book, you got a biography, tell me the real books in there. Because, a lot of people would just put every book they ever read. I want to know the books that really changed your life, because I'd go to the world's largest bookstore. I lived there about 2-3 times a week. I read probably on average about 200 to 300 books a year. I was like looking for an answer.
A sponge, right?
Well, I was living outside myself because I just want to share with you an insight for your younger listeners, because I'm 56, so I'm at a different stage right now in my life. I went and I met this woman. She was in medical school, this young girl, and she tells me we're doing the prep call to meet later on. I don't remember her name, but the gift she gave to me lingers to this day. So what she does, she says she's reading the most incredible book, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. So what do? I want to impress her. I go that afternoon and I buy that book and I'm devouring it. And this book is blowing my mind, because here's this young 25-year-old cocky kid who thinks he's the first person in the world ever to have these insights. Remember those days? It's different.
Yeah. I read the book. I think I was 18. It was my first year in college. It's one of the things I picked up after I had my experience.
So then I kept on reading it every year, sometimes twice a year. And I was asking myself, why do I keep on having this attraction towards it? And it's because every time I read that book, going back in my mind, getting that feeling right now, I realized I was in a different chapter in the book. Now, let me share what happened. I went on that date that night, and my intensity for this book overwhelmed her. She was not meant to be on my journey. I couldn't tell you who she was if I bumped into her in the street, but that book continued. And it's something I read. And when I wrote my last book called The King of Main Street, I'm following the keys. Now, let me share with you what happened. I finally asked myself, I was prepared to ask myself, what's your attraction to this book? And I realized I had been in this journey of like just reading, hoping that someone else was going to give me the answers. Like, do we give me the calm in here? Because I could read intellectually and saying, I'm going to go to this guru, I'm going to go to that thinker, this. And after a while, it all became the same thing. I could look at a book, read 3 pages, and I would know what was in the book. I could just feel it, because I had read like 5,000 books on my journey. And it was almost like maybe smoking cigarettes or being addicted to something. I was looking for crack cocaine. And what I mean by that, for my crack cocaine, is getting a way of thinking
in your mindset.
Completely, like just going like, break my paradigm, break my paradigm, break my paradigm, like Barbara Max Hubbard, when she wrote Co-Creator, she talked about she wanted to create a special type of university, and she had a list
Barbara
of
Hubbard, and it's not Max, it's Marx. But She went from the Homo sapiens to Homo universalis,
Yes.
and her development, and amazing woman. Had lunch with her at an event in LA, or just in Joshua Tree, a few years
Yeah.
before death. But amazing woman. Now let's go back to COVID for a minute, because you brought that up, and
Yeah.
that reflection. So, um, as you know, we talked beforehand, there was part of my mission here is to facilitate harmony among people and planet. Well, how's that going to happen? In order
Yeah.
for anything like that to happen, there has to be a moment where everybody has the opportunity to sequestrate and self-examine. So
Yeah.
what happened in COVID, right?
Okay.
Beyond who we want to project caused it, or all the nonsense about it, all the, confabulations and narratives that had turned out to be false, right? As we understand the science, and all the things that weren't involved with it now. However, when it happened, it was like the bell ringing in me. Here's the beginning of this process. And I said to my
Yeah.
wife, the very first day we went on lockdown, I said to her that, because she knows me well enough that we were anticipating something like this when it
Right.
happens. And now I really hope that in this sequestration and um, obsession on self-hygiene, right? Because there's a behavior modification in process there. And unlike your significant emotional event, like Massey calls them, right? There was this, oh shit, right? That everybody felt. And there were some that took advantage of that free will, chose to take the opportunity to ask themselves those questions. What do I believe in? Who am I? What do I believe in? What am I willing to do as a result of that? Why am I here? Right? All of those kinds of things. And then as we began to come out of that, all these virtual groups began forming of people, like you were talking about, seeking each other and finding them and having these next level conversations about what's happening, what we can do, not to point fingers, to elevate and say, okay, what can we do to co-create a new normal that we're all happy with, that serves humanity instead of usurps its power, like what's happening now? Because we've got everything that we could ever imagine as far as the resources to take care of everybody across the board. It's just not distributed properly to do so, which comes into the management, which comes into the system that we've been under the advisement of, if you will, or influence of, globally as well as locally. And now that nationalistic attitude is starting to disappear because we're global citizens. We are planetary citizens. We're on one planet. We are one people. And this, to me, seems like common sense. Now, how do we make that sense common is the next step. And that's where you and I are involved. What can we do? So in this
Well,
process with,
I think there's I think there's moments because there was a series of moments, and I actually realized that the universe nudges us, and the question is, do we
breadcrumbs all
pay
the time,
attention?
every moment of every day
Well,
is when you are,
sometimes it steps in, it's very pronounced, and it says you're not going this direction. Sometimes it comes, and there's moments in
yeah,
my life
that's the cosmic two before, right? That we want to
I've
avoid,
had.
yet because we don't make the decisions that we know are beneficial, we attempt to be codependent and do things that others think we should do, and then find out, oh, that's not the way. And
And
we've had,
I've had
I
a
know you and I have
number.
had them.
I've had a number of those moments, and then and it I'm a thick learner because I've always felt sort of blessed. Like I've seen things, I've experienced things. Like right now, a school I went to in Canada was the only military school in Canada. It's becoming quite famous. It's called Robertland Academy. I saw totalitarianism at this school, and it's lots of abuse happened at this school, and it's just finally closing down, and it's becoming a big thing in Canada, and it was considered the toughest military school in all of North America. If you got kicked out of Valley
That's the
Forge or
evidence of
any
what I'm talking about that comes out of COVID. People going, wait a minute. And this fits into the Mayan
right,
calendar, right? Where we have shifted our vibratory rate. We're at a different level now.
yeah,
We're slightly higher. What doesn't fit comes to the surface for reformation or complete removal because it
right.
doesn't fit. And it's like we don't have to do anything for that. All we have
Well,
to do is
when
maintain
you
our
asked
own
about
course.
COVID, one of the things that happened, because I'm anti-authoritarian, because I lived in a authoritarian system.
Sure.
So basically, I've seen this movie before,
It's
but I
built
just
on
want to
aggression.
step back. I ignored a lot of things in my own life, and I truly believe you manifest things in your body. And in 2019, I was in Toronto. I almost died. And I was told by the doctor, I was highly anemic and I had internal bleeding, and I showed up and I had like 5.4 hemoglobin. Like, anybody wants to know what normal is, it's close to 12. And they
Yeah.
were looking at me like, how are you still standing? Because I ignored my body. I just kept on going forward. I had external successes. I was literally, and my joke was before, I'm just, some relationships were toxic. I was saying I'm becoming spiritually anemic, and then I was really anemic, and it
Funny
was at
how
that
that correlates, huh?
it does. My aura and words matter, right? And that's a word I felt. What happened at that point? My ex-wife, I was married at the time. She was from San Diego, and she always wanted to go back. So I said, we had a few properties in San Diego, and I said, okay, let's just do it for a year, and I'll fly back and forth. So I jump, and those are moments in my life. I literally look at my life, and I've taken serious track jumps. You know what I mean? It's not like a slow progression. No, it's like I'm on this track, boom, I'm on that track. And it's very interesting because I was here when COVID happened, because in Canada, it became a totalitarian state.
Mhm.
And I knew something was wrong, but I was somewhat, I'm a stranger in the land. I'm just getting my green card because I was married to an American citizen.
Were
I
you
don't want to
carrying
cause
Robert along
problems.
with you too?
Oh, I was reading him, of course, and I'll tell you why I was reading him, because the world was scaring me so much. Because what
Amazing.
happened in what happened in Canada, I understood this, and this is where it was really important. Is I had to trust my instinct. I knew Holocaust survivors growing up, and they would tell me that logic told them to go left, but something pulled them to go right. And when they followed the right, they lived. And people who did the logic stuff, they ended up dead. And that's why I turned to Hawkins, and I read Power versus Force, because I realized I had to make split decisions. And I knew that by asking something, frame it yes, no, and have a
Right.
very concrete
Well,
answer,
and
I was
therein, in order to
following
do
that.
the testing too, right? This is one of the things you mentioned. Your body's so sensitive, you're kinesthetic. Our bodies are instruments, they are transceivers. We live
Yes,
from the shoulder up most of the time. We don't pay any attention to the body, and yet quantum physics now is showing everything is energy. And those
yes,
little instances, those little tingles or little pains or something like that in your body is something for you to go, oh, what's that about? And if, as you begin to question that, then the information comes as to what it is. And it's usually embedded within your consciousness as some kind of errant thinking, stinking thinking, if you will, that has disconnected you from you and the truth that you are. Perfect instance. Being adopted, I had gone through life, wondering about my birth parents, my wife, my second marriage. I had a practice when 4 kids. I got 8 great grandkids now, and but don't have because of since don't have a relationship with them. However, so Luba got me a subscription to Ancestry, in 2017 for her first Christmas. And in January of 2019, my half sister shows up. And so I meet my birth mother that summer. And we spent a
Beautiful.
week with her. And oh, it was amazing, you know. However, the point I was going to make is that I was the last person on her bucket list. The family didn't know about me until 10 years prior when her mother was on her deathbed and she blurted it out asking about me because nobody else knew about me. And so then she went through 4 different kinds of cancer and was in remission at the time that we met. And then after we met, everything just was fine. I had no regrets. I had no angst. I had no anger. I just was loving the fact that she loved me enough to give me up when she didn't think that she could take care of me. And I ended up with a wonderful family that had and was given just an absolutely amazing childhood as a result. Full of opportunities to learn and grow and be curious and not be threatened because I was so curious. Um, but that a year and a half later, she passed away. It was okay. I met, we got, everything was cool. She realized that she didn't have to hold on to her angst anymore, or regret, or anything of that nature, which she had held on to. And I think
Yes,
women who give their children up do.
for sure.
And then that manifested in her body as various cancers because you eat yourself up because you're what? Eating yourself up inside because of the anger you
Yes,
carry. So
yes.
that's a no-brainer. Um, when that happens, then there's ways to move through that if you catch it soon enough, right? But the thing is,
Well,
back to the sensitivity of the body, learning how to tune it, let alone play in concert, is one of the objectives we have at being in human form.
and I feel very fortunate because I speak from the lower diaphragm. I feel things. I feel
Mhm.
my life through. Well, and as I shared, I was a master trainer of neurolinguistic programming, and most people, they cut their breathing off when they speak, right? They're not
Right.
feeling. For me, I have to feel it intuitively. Now I've ignored things, and when I ignore things, I know, like I'm quite aware, but then the
Then you regret
universe.
it later. Right.
Well, not no no, because everything is part of life lesson.
Oh
I'm going to
yeah.
share with
Well, you regret
so,
it. I'm not saying you carry the regret. It's like, oh, right. And that's that moment of
well,
regret that you then let go of. And it's like, okay, now what did I learn there?
maybe I used to hold regret, but I for many years, and I learned the presupposition to approach things. There's no such thing as failure. It happens to be a
Exactly.
lesson, and
Yeah.
life is school. So in essence,
It's not
there's
failure, it's
something
just
later.
stepping stones.
Yeah, later on, this is going to have incredible value. And it did have much of what happened to me and the experiences I had when I was a kid, which were very tough. During COVID, I I was aware some things were wrong. I took care precautions. I remember meeting a familial child. For those of your listeners who don't know what that is, in Britain and in Canada, not so much in the US, there was a morning sickness drug that they gave to women while their children, their babies, were forming their limbs. So babies were being born with like dull limbs instead
Mm.
of like a full lead. And this is the reason why when women are pregnant, women won't eat a can of tuna, God forbid, mercury or smoke or do anything, because that was like the shock into the system. Like, hey, you just don't take anything while you're pregnant, because look what happened when you listened to doctors and you took this. So things didn't mesh with me, and there were a number of things that I became very aware of, and I became a deep student. Like, I started studying biology and like the history of it and everything. I would read. Then I started reading white papers at the UN, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, you name it, Gavi, everything. And that's
As many Pisceans as I know, I think that's their nature. They just dive into everything. My wife's that way too. She's one of the most investigative people that I'm aware. As a Cancerian, I'm much more empathic. I don't need to do that because I know the truth's going to emerge because of the process that I've learned within myself, just to be patient and wait, right? You still have the intention, you still have the curiosity and the questions, but you don't have, or at least for me, I don't have the mental perturbations that are involved in order to get the answers, right?
Oh, I
And I'm not
definitely,
saying, and there's no judgment, right? This is just
I know.
different operating
I,
system.
I became like, when I get it, well, I shared with you, like during I probably read over 5,000 books. So in
Yeah.
essence, I will exhaust topics. I will exhaust them. I will, I will even know what the book's going to say, but basically I have a discussion, a pseudo conversation with the author, and I can tell an author who's writing because the subject and they want to get everybody up, and I can tell when he says, I'm great. Like, I can immediately tell that. I can turn off to it, and I'm very quick to it now, and that, through discernment. But what happened during COVID is I knew something was wrong, and I started reading all this stuff and educating, because my world had been basically, I lived a world where I got to create my own world, and I would keep the government and everybody out. Only thing, but there was no choice. It was
Right.
all being implemented. And I had a good friend, and it was to my detriment and to my positive, because in Canada, I was a regular on national television in finance. I was a university professor. I was a consultant within my area of expertise. No one knew my politics. I was just a nice guy with a smile who knew what to do certain things and would come to me. Well, a good
Hmm.
friend of mine, like someone I considered like my brother, he was a prosecutor for the Canadian government, and he was forced into retirement because he was not going to take the medical experiment.
Right.
But he was someone who was OCD. What I mean, he was funny, perfect, whatever, and he could make jokes about the fact you could set your clock by him, and like he needed, but he left Canada the
We need
last
those
day
kind of
that,
people too, right? That works for
right.
everybody that way. We all
He
feed
was,
off of each other and we don't even realize.
well, he was like he was, he was my brother. I get sad about this, but I want to share what occurred. So I was so happy because he did something so out of character. The last day that Canadians who were not vaxxed could fly out of Canada, he fled, and he went down to Mexico. The problem is his OCD kicked in and he didn't have his patterns. He went back to Canada. He was going to be made a judge before he was forced in retirement too.
Oh,
He kills himself. I get the call on December 26th, 2021. And then a few days later, I'm watching Vaccine Choice Canada, and Naomi Wolf is on. And I don't know if you're familiar with Naomi Wolf. She's
I'm
one of the
familiar
most
with the
vocal
name, but
people.
not necessarily who or what.
She's one of the most. She was one of the most vocal people about the vaccine. When the
Okay.
Pfizer documents were released, she's got like 3,000 people who volunteered, experts who've read through it and shown us how this thing was just poison. Like, I'm
Right.
going to call it
Yeah,
what
there
it
were
is,
several
because that's what.
scientists that were coming up and coming out,
Right.
um,
But she
and getting
spoke to
shut
this
down
group.
on YouTube and Facebook and every
Yep.
place else, right? That
Right.
censorship was so
Oh,
obvious.
I had that censorship because at that point I wrote a piece on my friend Larry, and I gave it to her, and it went viral. It had like 3 million reads, and it went through the Canadian government too. Like, it was subversive. Like, in essence, someone I knew contacted me saying that they was told to not share it because it basically used him killing himself and talking about how this was a scam and about this person. And then the truckers happened. And as a Canadian, I cried. Like, literally, I thought because I was stuck in America. I never thought I would die outside of Toronto. I'm not in Toronto. I live in San Diego now. My kids were American to begin with, but now they're truly San Diegans. I don't think I could ever get them back to the cold.
Oh, I got a couple of
And
stepsons that were stationed at Navy base there. They're both, one's
so,
on a sub now and the other one's in Okinawa.
well, I, I started speaking out, and I got hate. I lost in 1 week. I've got a big following on LinkedIn. I lost 5,000 people from Canada and whatever. And like these people were, uh, I don't call them sheeple. The term I use in my book and is sleeples, not sheeple, because sheeple says that a person doesn't have the potential to wake up. A sleeple has the potential to wake up. They have the potential, like they're groggy, right? We all wake up asleep, and we have the potential to wake up a little more each and every day
Right.
or through our life
Well, and therein
experiences.
was the choice when everybody went on lockdown, and the choices of whether to get vaxxed or not took place. And my wife and I, uh, we were already spending 24/7 together. Her studio was in the house. She's a piano teacher. I worked out of the house. We didn't change our activities. We didn't put on masks. We didn't do vax, and we went pretty much anywhere that we could, right? There was a few places that wouldn't let you in if you weren't masked. Nobody questioned the vaccine. We didn't fly anywhere. And yet our lives didn't change. They got better during that process, which
Well, the way it
was the
actually
total
became,
opposite of what other people were experiencing. And it was so hard to see people suffer because of their own choices.
well, one of the things that really great, well, I really learned to stand up. I would walk out with, I would go to places with the government document that says that if I told you I was exempt and you pressed, you personally would have a $75,000 fine. People didn't know this. And I would hold it up, take my camera after they tell me, I couldn't come in. And I said, you sure you want to ask me again to put on the mask? And then I would go, I want you to read what $75,000 personally, not, and someone who's a greeter at a dollar store is not going to then stop me. I was embarrassing to my kids because I was a
I
sovereign.
can imagine.
Like
Come on, what are you doing?
oh, I,
You're
I
standing
was,
up for what needed to be stood for.
and the reason I did this, and I shared with you earlier, I went to a school it was a totalitarian school, and right now it's just been closed for like 40 years of abuse, and it's going to become big. They're doing a documentary for Netflix on it. I'd seen it. I wasn't really impacted by it. The things that happened to other kids, I wasn't part of it, but I seen it and I felt it. It was in my muscles. There's an African saying
Right.
that says it's not real unless it's in your muscles. It was in my muscles. My spidey sense. I said, I've seen this before. It doesn't end well. And I'm not going to participate in it. And it's like usually what you find out with a bully, they want to find people who are going to bend the knee. As soon as I said this to some big guy who's saying, you put your mask on it or else. And I'd show this, you have to see, I'm not going to, even the manager being called, I'm not willing for this corporation to get a $75,000 fine. It's just, and what was it? Was paper. That's the power of words too. Ooh,
Right.
virus. I'm friends with one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, and he's pro-carbon. He said, think about carbon and viruses, two things you can't see. I studied hypnosis for 30 years. I'll tell you the most powerful thing about studying hypnosis is actually telling you I studied hypnosis. The word puts the person in a trance, not me. And that's what was happening. Ooh, scary. You're dirty, this and that. Now I know how Jews were rounded up and said, the Germans weren't bad people. They were the most educated, most advanced people in the world. But what happened is a corrosive meme got into them. And guess what? People did not stand up because all tyrannies fall when good people say, no, I will not
Right.
participate. And that because who is worse, the person who gives the order or the one who follows the order? The one who follows the order I actually know that there were people who really bought into it and still buy into it. I understand them. The problem I have, because the sleeples I break into two categories are sleeples. So a sleeple is not a sheep. This is a person who could wake up. But sleeples fall into two categories, and I define this in my new book. The first category is a useful idiot. What is a useful idiot? Yeah, they're right. Yeah, maybe they'll wake up. But I'll tell you the ones I have a problem with. I have a problem with the useful tools. They know it's wrong and they still do it. And you want to know something? If you discover something, you could have all the excuses. You're an NPC, you're asleep, you're a sleeple. That's one thing. But once you know and you still persist, you are part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the conclusion I came to. And when my friend Larry took his life, I started speaking out. And in Canada, and this is really weird, Zan, my LinkedIn, and it's LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not popular, right? It's like the boring man's, women's platform, right? I was getting up to 2 million impressions a week off the stuff I was writing, the videos I was doing. And but what happened out of it is the right people were showing up. And what do I mean by the right people? We're having a real conversation. I was present to my life. This conversation you and I are having, we're present. I don't think I was present. I know when I almost died in 2019, and they were telling me something is wrong with me, I was already making plans for next week. I didn't know that after the surgery and everything, I was also going to be wearing a catheter for 2 months. Like, I just thought I'd be able to, I wasn't present.
Oh, the graces
Like
of getting old. I have my little vulnerable share. My prostate did its thing. It's the only thing that's ever happened to me, and I ended up having to wear a catheter for 3 weeks afterwards. And that's not a fun thing to do, and certainly limits your activity.
yeah, well, I have no shame. It's part of getting old. My point
Yeah,
is,
things are what they are, right? Why can't we be open and vulnerable enough just to share what is? Now, that doesn't, my dad used to say the truth is less than full disclosure, right? You don't have to give all the intricate details,
I'm not
that
giving.
something. However, life is what it is. You have things going on. It's what makes us available to each other, is that shared experience that we can have and understand and have empathy for with others. Now, in this um, movement towards and with your book, right? Where's the gold?
I'll tell you where the gold is. Things were happening, things that didn't sit right with me sort of fell out of my life. I a chapter in my life, I had been married to someone who for 20 years we had a relationship was what I needed to be experienced, and it was coming to an end. I finally was able to go back to Toronto after not being there for quite a long time. It was very funny when I shared with you I was getting 2 million impressions a week when I was really speaking out. It's like I'm thinking, didn't you guys watch Sesame
Huge.
Street? What doesn't fit like the other? Like, that's how I was doing, and I was like asking questions because my thought was not like to speak at people. It's like, I'm hoping that your front lobe will start clicking. Like, one of the ways,
Right.
and before I move into that, what the example I would give is, if you want to wake someone up, the first thing I just ask people, like, I like Jesus or Christ. It's like, my thing is, I'm just going to have love towards you. I'm not going to judge you. That's one.
Well,
Then I'm going to
that's the thing we
ask,
do, right? We tend to point fingers and want to condemn, criticize, castigate, whatever,
right.
not realizing that we got three coming back at us, and there's that Trinity again, right? So do we have solutions for that? You know, that this is the whole thing about,
Well, my
are
whole thing
we,
is,
if I could finish here for just a second,
yeah,
when you have that kind of opportunity to look at what's the potential here, what can we find to take us further? It's like Buckminster Fuller, right? But before him, Socrates said, don't fight, create a better system, right? So that's what we're doing now in this process. How do we create this better system? And is this the gold that you're bringing out in the explanation of your book?
yes, partially. I just want to share something. So, my marriage fell apart. My business, I don't want to do what I used to do. I can't go back. It's like, there's three things I learned in life you can't do. You can't go home. You can't go to a home you left. You can't go to a job you're no longer with, and you can never return back to a relationship. However, I went back to Toronto, and what was really interesting, out of those 2 million people a week who were like, clicking on my stuff, 600,000 were Canadians. Most were in the greater Toronto area. And for those of your listeners who don't know, Canada's 40 million people, but the greater Toronto area happens to be about 27% of the whole country's population. So if Trump turns Canada into the 51st state, he just has to get rid of, let's say, about a 5-hour drive 100 miles north of the US-Canada border, and he can have all the resources and everything, because that's where Canada lives. It's like California. Everyone lives on the coast. This is actually more concentrated. There's like 27 million people out of 41 million who live on this
There again,
7-hour
and I'd
drive.
caution you, Peter, because here's one thing that
Yeah.
I just heard you say. You brought Trump in and you gave an impression that didn't feel good to me, right?
How,
Those kinds of things to me are unnecessary in looking at creating the better systems, because you brought us
I
back
was just being,
into,
I was just
I'm
being
just,
facetious by using that.
well, I understand, but the fact that you did it, the words that came out of your mouth gave a wrong impression, in my opinion, that I would rather folks not have, because
Okay.
it creates that additional words bias, right? Um, Polarization, right? We don't want to do that. We're working on a
Yeah.
unification of people that want to be planetary citizens, so that
Yeah.
we can have a planet that nurtures everyone, and our society does that as well. When we continue to do these things, that's that finger that's pointing where that we're unconscious of, really, not saying you're unconscious, because I don't know that, maybe in that you wanted to say it as kind of a humorous kind of thing. However, um, in my experience, I have to be real careful of that. I'm one of the most sarcastic son of bitches that you'll find. But I'm learning that, even though the brilliance that allows me to do that, the words that I use, I really have to be tender or not use at all, because that's an old part of the old paradigm that we use to inflict rather than invite. That makes
I will
sense?
agree, and I agree, and I'll add. The thing is,
Yeah,
each
good.
word, one of the things, because I'm very much into words, and I know that words are constellations. And basically, if I say a beach, my beach is different than yours. So for
Yeah.
me personally,
Well, I love
it
you. Now,
wasn't.
I don't want to give you the wrong impression. That was
Oh
not
no, no, but
be
I want to share.
critical,
For me
right?
personally,
Yeah.
that's wasn't an issue. But I understand some words to people are trigger words. I'm not saying it is. And the way I was doing is I just wanted some levity with it. But I want to get back to the point I wanted to
I
share with
love
you.
levity, and something.
I went back to Canada, and I ended up being asked to speak at every freedom group. People who were resisting. And for our friends around the world, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia got it the worst. We're talking 2.5 years of lockdown. Like, it was just terrible. Like, Trudeau's government spent $1 trillion. Like, that's like, for Canada, that's huge, right? Like, he
Right.
went into debt. Like, he implemented all these things that were not pro-human.
Sure. So let's
And
pull it back
I
a little
start,
bit. Let's pull it back, and
yeah,
rather than looking at those things, let's look at on a daily basis, because we're about out of time, and I want to get some key points,
right,
you know,
right.
some insight from you as to on a daily, weekly, moment to moment basis, what are the things that helped you move beyond um, the challenges and the constraints that you felt in order to find the freedom to be who you are?
Writing. One of the things that I discovered early on is many of the people that we admire from afar wrote down their thoughts in journals. And I write. I write every day on anything that captures my attention. And I write it because I want to know it for myself. I want to come to an understanding. So I'm not going to be wishy-washy when the subject comes up. Like, for example, the conversation that you and I just had using the leader of this nation,
Yeah.
I look at words being constellations. Basically, the most hypnotic word in anybody's language is their name. It's their call, it's their bird whistle. And certain things will trigger people, certain things will make people feel relaxed. And I understand it's a constellation. For me, I only came to that understanding because I write every day. I read
Mhm.
something and say, well, what do I think about it? How does it make me feel? Because I'm a slow person, meaning how many times have when I was younger that someone would say something and I didn't have something to say back. Or later on I thought about it. Well, as I get older, because I've written more than I've read now at this stage in my life, I'm able to boom, I'm able to come back and to understand it. And I think it goes back to what we mentioned earlier. You mentioned about Socrates, know thyself. Most
Yeah.
people are too frightened to go and meet the greatest person that they're ever going to meet, which is themselves.
Hmm.
And Carl Jung, some of his theories I like or not, but one of the things I liked about what he had a metaphor. He said the morning of life is about accumulation and focusing out there, and the afternoon and evening is about going in and basically giving it all away and giving away your attachments, not just physically or things, but also your insight, your everything to share, mentoring younger people, things like that. But if
Hmm.
you're not conscious of it, how would you be able to give it? And as I shared with you, well, the wake up moment for me is I know I'm infinite. This is finite.
Right. And you
So
mentioned with Jung, one of the things that I ran across one of his quotes recently that I thought was just so cool. He says, "There is a mystical fool in me that proved to be stronger, excuse me, than all my science." So I'm going to read that again. There is a mystical fool in me that proved to be stronger than all my science.
I fully agree.
That's
Can I share one thing?
that interconnectedness. But we're actually I'm way over time, Peter.
okay, no
This
problem.
fascinating conversation. I would love to carry on, um, and yet I try to keep things within certain certain
Yeah.
limitations. And it's been a really enjoyable conversation. If you have one thing short, as far as an insight for how people can shift, I understand, the writing, it gives you the chance, the catharsism that happens in that, the being able to see and hear the words that you're reading and your mind processing them and questioning them and feeding back to you maybe something more that you didn't think about because of that. It's a wonderful way for self-examination to begin as well. So what would you like as a finishing comment?
I want to share that my latest book, The King of May, sorry, it starts with gold, which is a metaphor for tangible de-risking and rematerializing what's important. But most importantly, the tools that you can use to look at the world differently. And one of the things that I want to leave with you is years ago, I saw Ken Burns, who did all those documentaries like Civil War, baseball, jazz, and everything. And he says, if you don't know where you've come from. You won't know where you are or where you're going. So what we do in this book, it starts with gold, is we show where we've been, where we can go, and it all comes down to what you were sharing with Zen. It's about community. It's being a sovereign. It's about going back to the things that are important, because a lot of this stuff is becoming digital. People are not having relationships. They're not touching, spelling, all these things, and they're completely lost. They can't tell the difference between a digital image and a real person. And what we've done here, my co-writer and myself, we actually lay it down. Now, I'm an expert in finance, so in essence, I think it was Stephen Covey's, he says, if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. I'm not an expert in a lot of things. So what we focused is on the financial system.
Cool.
And I would agree. It doesn't matter who's in power. You have to ask what the agenda is. And I do believe that this is a hiccup, because before any great growth, you're going to have some stumble. And that's where we are now.
Absolutely.
And I am very optimistic for the future.
Chaos is just patterns we don't recognize yet. It's new things being presented, the challenge to change. There's only 3 letters difference between the 2 words, the LLE and challenge. And I see those liabilities, limitations, and excuses that we impose upon ourselves. And to grow beyond that's our objective. So, Peter, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. My honor.
Great. Namaste and in la catch, and thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as I said before, do like, follow, subscribe, and share. It helps us all out. And visit planetarycitizens.net and get your free copy of this book. It will change your life. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.